Hello everyone, my name is Tobias Kreutzer and I'm a PhD student at the Technical University of Dortmund in Germany and also a research assistant at the Rhine-Ruhr Center for Science Communication Research. Today I want to give a presentation entitled The Devil in the Disciplines Towards a Culture of Field-Specific Self-Reflection of Knowledge Production, Publication Systems and External Communication Processes. I want to start with having a look on how scientific trust developed during the COVID crisis in Germany. And as we can see, in Germany during the year of 2020, there was a peak in scientific trust in April, which then normalized towards the end of the year. Several observers have commented on how people's tolerance for scientific uncertainty and non-definite information decreased with the time during the early stages of the pandemic. And that has to do with the first contradictions and different political strategies coming from scientific knowledge and how people at first were willing to believe that there's a certain answer to things and then with the time saw how that is not the case. And I only brought two examples for observers commenting on that. So there was a first source of irritation which had to do with science and public science correcting itself in the face of a highly dynamic situation, which led to this kind of irritation. And at the same time, the general public still perceived science around COVID as mainly medical and biological, as we can see from the chart on the left side. So this was what was connected to it in the public discourse. But at the same time, public discourse and scientific policy advice was opening up to other disciplines, which further, in a way, increased ambiguity and fostered this kind of irritation. And we can see that from the disciplines represented in the Leopoldina Committee, which was a committee of the German National Academy of the Sciences. And that was really interdisciplinary, as we can see on the chart on the right side. These observations from the early stages of the COVID pandemic bring me to what I want to propose today. And I want to subtitle it Sustaining Trust in Science Facing Complex Socio-Political Challenges, a field-specific approach. My approach builds on what partly has already been suggested by people like Jasonov and also Borchelt, and that's why I included these on this slide. Jasonov, for example, talks of technologies of humility instead of technologies of hubris, which has to be seen as a new approach, a new way of communicating science. These technologies compel us to reflect on the sources of ambiguity, indeterminacy, and complexity, she says. And Borchelt combines that with narratives and narratives of humility and says that in science communication there has to be a paradigm shift which focuses on process instead of the product of science. So yeah, these two are already communicating partiality and humility to tackle the first source of uncertainty, the nature of science, that it's correcting itself. And now I want to propose communicating partiality and humility on a field-specific level. That is what I want to talk and what I want to propose here. So this new discipline-specific perspective has to have implications for how we measure public interaction with science and how we look at it, what perspective we take on it. So for this matter, I want to bring up again the dimensions and the different dimensions which have been discussed publicly for a while now of the public understanding of science and humanities concept. And I want to look at these dimensions of the concept and ask the question, what can we learn from taking this discipline-specific perspective? So if we try and connect, and this is what I tried here, I tried to make a loose connection between the well-known push dimensions and certain discipline-specific dimensions. So at first, if we have a look at the dimension of scientific knowledge, we can see that knowledge can take different forms. It can, in disciplines, take the form of theories and laws, but also of hard facts or facts which come to life through a different methodology. If we look at the dimension of knowledge of scientific methods, then we can make differences between temporariness and uncertainty, qualitative and quantitative methods, and theoretical and experimental methods, which also totally differ depending on what discipline we are looking at. And the same goes for the knowledge of scientific systems and institutions. There are private and public scientific institutions and funding, which differ very much from each other. There's a different degree of internationalization between the different disciplines, and also the publication regime is a different one in each case. So there are like smaller sub-dimensions within these push dimensions which can be connected to the scientific disciplines. To visualize this idea, I brought 3 cases for differentiation. 3 cases where more conscious interaction with and communication of the own field could make a difference. So the first case I brought I call Two Cultures, a history of bias in public science. And this case is supposed to raise awareness of historic associations and biases, dominant concepts distinguishing between, for example, science and humanities. This is what the still very dominant thesis of, for example, Snow, although it dates back to post-war times. But this thesis of the two cultures still makes up this distinction between helpful science and technologies and unhelpful humanities. Also, as Coring, for example, has observed, there has been a dominant paradigm of science popularization as a dominant deficit-based concept structuring science communication and journalism around science, which also is still very present. So awareness for that would be what I want to show with this case. The second case I called Methodology and the Nature of Scientific Findings. And this one is concerned with how media and public perceive scientific methods and results from different disciplines differently. We can have a look at methods, how they can be quantitative and qualitative, how methods can be experimental and theoretical, or how a discipline can be more applied and easily be adaptable to the public and to concrete examples in the public. And all of these factors play a role for media interest. This third case, Cultures of Scientific Publication, looks at the different degrees of accessibility to knowledge in different disciplines. So there are differences, obviously, in academic publication cultures. Some publish in books, some rely on monographies, others rely on high-ranking international journals. So that may lead to complex heuristics and problems for media and the public to get an inner view of what actually happens within the field. Bromme and others have already wrote about and worked to how epistemological judgments onto a specific topic rely on different sources, and these 3 sources they found out were epistemological beliefs, ontological knowledge, and topic-related knowledge. So there is definitely a hint that this more self-reflective way of looking at one's discipline and communicating it can help to foster sustainable trust in science. They even wrote about my introductory example of COVID and trust in science during COVID and said that in general there was a strong credit of trust in science in Germany at the beginning of the pandemic, but then to achieve this sustainable perspective, when we look at trust in science, it is important for supporting informed trust in science and in scientists to explain clearly a scientist-specific kind of expertise. And this is what my cases and my examples and my general idea is pointing at. To wrap this all up, I brought 4 suggestions for communication practice. And I think at first it's important to make a connection, relate epistemological nature and interest of a specific field to public relevance. Then context is key. The reflection and communication of the discipline-specific scientific process and the giants on whose shoulders we all stand in what we do. Then it is key to label the labyrinth, provide help and heuristics for media and public to navigate the discipline-specific publication ramps which reach from book publications to high-ranking journals on an international level. And then, last but not least, know your limits, because reputable answers in a way come from also making clear the limits of their own discipline-specific perspective. That was my presentation. Thank you all for paying attention.